Francis, the God you worship, how could that God interact with the physical world?
So, Robert, clearly this is an issue that many scientists are puzzled by because, first of all, I think they're having trouble with the concept of God in the first place. But if God...
Let's say we recognize God exists. We know the physical structure is as it is. How do we intersect the two?
Well, the first sort of initial intersection for a believer is that God started the whole process, designed the laws, came up with the plan. That maybe
He's
is
got the
less
blueprint.
Okay, he's got the blueprint. But is he in some sort of way active today? Or is he standing back sort of watching what he started, hoping it goes well? I think for the most part, God does not intervene in daily moments in a way that you would recognize. We're here, clearly we're getting into the topic of miracles. Do miracles occur where things happen that are clearly breaking the laws of nature? That's a tough question for a scientist, but actually it's not as tough for me as maybe it seems. The big question is, do you believe in a God who is interested in human beings and who exists at least in part outside of nature? If you accept those things, then the idea that God could, on rare occasions, to suit his purposes, invade the natural world and temporarily suspend those laws in a way which to us would certainly have to appear as if something miraculous had happened. Lewis, in his wonderful book called Miracles, goes through this argument. I mean, the way in which miracles can be dismissed is one of two possibilities. Either everything's a miracle, which sort of reduces it to something rather silly, or that they just can't occur by definition. I'm in the middle. I would be very skeptical about a miraculous event until I had ruled out, from a scientific perspective, every possible natural explanation. But I wouldn't have my prior probability in a Bayesian sense here be zero for a miracle having occurred. I've never seen one, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that they do occur, particularly at moments where God is trying to send a message of an important sort. They're not just randomly shaken into history in a way that just is capricious. I think if miracles do occur, they must be an important message that's coming across. This is certainly what Polkinghorne has argued very cogently in several of his discourses on this topic. So in that regard, yeah, I think God can be active today in a miraculous way, but maybe more significantly on a daily basis. Is God active in our lives if we choose to allow him to be as a relationship? And that seems to me very much what being a believer is all about. It's not that you are choosing to worship some distant entity, at least not my faith. It is a choice to try to build a relationship through the process of prayer, which is a mysterious act that is not easily subjected to definitional approaches, with this entity, this mind. I think is the closest word I have to describe what God is. Yes, I mean, in my life, that's a very important part of discovering who I am, because who I am relates to who he is. And in that regard, he's busy every day.
Do I hear like two levels of God's interaction in the world? One is this mental interaction between our minds and God's minds on some way. The other is a more physical interaction between God's mind and the physical world. Do you have any sense of the mechanism, having spent your life in discerning mechanisms of how things work and how things fit together to make causal relationships? Do you have any speculations on how this might happen on a causal basis?
In the physical intervention arena, no. I mean, it would be a suspension of the laws of nature, which is very hard to get your mind about how that would work. But I think
at the quantum level, at the atomic level, cellular level, species level, who knows, right?
We're trapped in these physical laws. To imagine how they could be suspended is just impossible to get my mind around. But God isn't trapped in them. He designed them. So if he chose to suspend them, he would figure out a way, be it quantum or whatever. The other aspect,
and wouldn't have to consult with you.
Oh, no. Thank goodness for that, because that would totally screw the whole thing up. There would be no successful miracles if humans were consulted about the mechanism. They'd get the equations wrong, I'm sure. In terms of this daily interaction on a spiritual mental sphere, I don't understand entirely how that works in terms of which neurons and neurotransmitters are involved. It's very interesting to see the way in which that field is developing to identify parts of the brain that are involved in spiritual experience. But that, for me, in no way lessens the validity of the spiritual experience. It just says that, like everything else about us, phenomenon that have real value have to have some sort of material context, and we're beginning to learn what that is. But it doesn't trump the fact that the spiritual experience is itself real and is not fully explained by the material aspects that go into it.